In November of 2025, I arrived in the harbor town of Mossel Bay, South Africa. I came as a trainee of Africa Media Academy's underwater videography program. The company's mission is to give trainees the education and practice needed to produce the kinds of images that inspire ongoing conservation efforts, giving the public a greater taste of and respect for the natural beauty that the continent harbors. So I took to the water on the hunt for shots, and what I found was disquieting. My dives in the Western Cape began at Dolosse. It's a shallow reef along a concrete breakwater, part of a marine protected site, that sits just under a braai restaurant. My instructor Kristen came with a PVC pipe of bait, and the pajama sharks swam in like pigeons chasing tossed French fries. Lithe, striped bodies and curious prodding snouts swirled around the bait and slipped directly under us, scratching their backs on our gear like strolling house cats. The strictest form of the diver's code is to take only photos and leave only bubbles, which makes baited dives a point of contention. Encroaching on the natural world out of reverence for it is always a contradictory act. Whenever a human being brings you a story of nature, they're bringing you a story of how they've disturbed it. Every majestic portrait of a lion required a boot trotting on the grass. The goal is to do no harm, or at least mitigate it, but that requires a surgical touch, and video and scuba both involve clumsy learning processes with intricate, demanding equipment. My first practice swim with the camera was an exercise in frustration, fighting the relentless buoyancy of my wetsuit on any attempt to get underwater. And every neophyte diver kicks up sand, bumps into the reef, grabs for a handhold in a swell, and grasps onto what they think is a rock, but reveals itself to be a sponge or coral, now broken. And more complicated equipment usually means more mishaps. Producing images of animals for a mass audience is ethically fraught. Craig Foster shot the 2021 Oscar winner, My Octopus Teacher, just 400 kilometers away from where I was swimming. After its initial buzz cooled, the documentary drew some ire for how Foster, its human co-star, repeatedly interfered with a wild octopus, waxing poetic about how his interactions with her helped him heal his personal turmoil. The film is earnest, but it treats Foster's octopus like a sidekick, mentor, love interest supporting his arc, and spends very little time interrogating how Foster's intrusions into the animal's habitat affected her well-being. We look into these animals, and we're always looking for a mirror. There's a concept called charismatic megafauna. These are popular, often large animals that make for good environmental mascots because we can't help but imbue them with fascination, reverence, empathy. Almost all of them are endangered. We just now consume their images for emotional nourishment, while others consume them as skins, meat, bycatch, ivory. So when my instructor pointed out this common octopus at Dolosse, I was pulled between that allure of witnessing a thinking mind wholly unlike my own, and that ethic I agreed to when I took my first ever dive. The one I agreed to when I signed on to be entrusted with this camera and the animals I'd be filming. I think it's a female. Roman, our dive leader and skipper in Mossel Bay, named her Gary. It felt wrong to move closer. I was a black mass invading her home, spewing bubbles and shaking the sand. If Gary was comparing me to anything in her frame of reference, she might take me as a threat. If any other diver had disturbed her before, she might make that connection. After a while, I moved my camera, capturing different angles. She didn't flinch, just subtly shifted the color display on her eyes. For 10 minutes, we watched each other. She stayed curled in her den, craning her eyes. A few times she uncurled an arm, reaching, then changing her mind and recoiling it. A red Roman swam overhead. She didn't flinch from the predatory fish, just stayed watching. Until, finally, she reached out an arm, suction cups feeling and tasting the glass and plastic of my camera's protective dome, then retracted. The red Roman circled back low, caudal fin slapping sand into her face. She blanched, recoiled, and I figured her peace had been disturbed enough, and took my leave. I saw several octopuses in Mossel Bay, in Dolosse during a night dive, in a nearby reef on Santos Beach. In those same sites, some close relatives, cuttlefish. The first cruised over the sea floor under our torch beams on a night dive before retiring into the sand. An older one rose from a hollow in the rock, showing my camera its scarred body before jetting away. Each time the eyes of one of these alien intelligences met mine, I caught myself wanting to know what it is that they saw. We drove an hour away for a weekend in Stilbaai, hoping for sand tiger sharks. Here they're called ragged tooth or raggies. In those colder, darker, deeper reefs, the raggies eluded us, our dive leader Sean raising his arms to show us the size of one that swam off just as soon as we had touched bottom. Instead, we found alien landscapes where massive orange sponges grew in Stonehenge-like slabs, and the sea squirts clustered in sprawling colonies, and red fan corals waved in the surge while basket stars clung to them with their branching arms, perched high as they sifted for plankton. But no sharks. So back to Mossel Bay we went for a cage match. In rolling swell, in a rocking cage hanging from a swaying boat, locked in a struggle to keep my camera's waterproof dome from scratching or cracking against the bars, my lens managed to capture 2 copper sharks and a humpback dolphin, tearing through chummed water, called by the intoxicating scent of a butchered tuna head. Maybe a cage is the best place for a photographer. When I cruised through reefs with my Sony Alpha 7 II encased in its waterproof armor, I'd find flocks of fish gently grazing, then darting away and schooling for safety from the descending black monstrosity I'd become. With finite air, finite battery, and finite data storage, I glided like a hungry vulture to scour the reef for images. I felt like Victor Frankenstein pursuing nature to her hiding places, as my lens and lights scanned crevices for hiding gobies and dipped under outcroppings for fleeing fish. One of my final dives would be in Flat Rock. It's a popular fishing spot, which makes it a popular site for reef cleanup efforts. Here, the local divers perform their voluntary community service, an attempt at good stewardship for the reefs where they regularly tread. In relentless surge and murky water, they took scissors in hand, cutting vast tangles of fishing line wrapped around the reef like surgeons in a snowstorm. I watched as they pulled massive clumps of line heavy with accumulated algae dispersing clouds of sand. The water, as ever, was indifferent, rolling and restricting our visibility despite our noble intentions. And while we knocked into each other, the purity of our mission was unmarred by lapses in dive skill. And rather than fleeing, curious evil-eye pufferfish circled, watching the invaders remove the strange thin filaments that would otherwise choke their gills and poison their water with dissolving plastic. In me, there is something that would very much like to believe that something living in that reef could sense our benevolence, that they'd understand that the bubble-spewing titans invading their homes truly meant no harm. But that desire is an inherently narcissistic one. There's an inescapable narcissism that colors every human interaction with nature, even the well-meaning ones. The sharks at Dolosse cannot dispute the efficacy of our protection efforts. Foster's octopus can't tell us how she experienced their relationship. We study the animals, we posit what suits their well-being, and we act. And along the way, we also try to wet our beaks. Some of us want to fish, some want to take pictures, and some want to look into an animal's eyes and feel it looking back. Whenever we step out of our steel and plastic homes into someone else's natural habitat, I think we're pulled by an earnest desire to regain a connection that we've lost. And often, we trample the grass and kick up the sand and break off a piece of someone's home. We always come to take images, experiences, a sense of communion, and we hope that we aren't comparable to those who have come for plunder or conquest or chattel. There are differences in kind and differences in degree, and they are vast and varied and dizzying to consider. But 4 degrees Celsius of global temperature increase is also dizzying to consider. 22 million metric tons of plastic in the ocean is nauseating to consider. 140,000 species going extinct per year is devastating to consider. With the effects of anthropogenic climate change only accelerating, it becomes an increasingly urgent and uncomfortable question: when should we stop aiming cameras at suffering animals, producing pictures for our own edification, and start aiming at the people responsible? Who should see a coral reef when massive industries are bleaching them while a handful of NGOs try to regrow them? How do you love the ocean when you visit it while breathing air passed through a petroleum-powered compressor, toting a camera powered by rare earth minerals? All this may one day be gone. And if that should come to pass, we'll be glad for those who took only pictures, because those pictures will be all that's left. But those pictures will be as they are now for us, not for them. That old move of splashing cold water on your face to clear your head and calm your nerves is actually prehistoric. It's called the mammalian dive reflex, the heart rate slowing down to conserve oxygen underwater. Maybe it's one remaining piece of that old connection we've lost. Maybe rebuilding it is a clumsy act, a skill that needs to be relearned step by faltering, stumbling step. Maybe projecting yourself onto an octopus and imagining that it feels like you do is one of those faltering, stumbling steps. Maybe that twinge of guilt looking into the eyes of a net-tangled turtle before going out for mass-fished sushi is one of those faltering, stumbling steps. And maybe somewhere in this clumsy learning process, there are some right steps we can take that will allow us to float through these wild places, leaving only bubbles. And when we've stopped breaking other living things' homes, we can safely, benignly find a way to rejoin them.